Let me call to order the Williamsport City Council meeting of November 20th. Please rise for invocation by Councilman Allison, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Heavenly Father, we come tonight as we enter into the season of holidays, and it's appropriate this Thanksgiving week that we begin with Thanksgiving and express the thankfulness in our hearts. Lord, as we look around our nation and around this world and see the distress and trials and problems that are deep-seated for so many people in far-flung places in the earth that are life and death, Lord, we're thankful tonight that the community we live in, although we have our problems and issues, we're not suffering as they do. Lord, and it doesn't mean that we're better than anybody else. Lord, it just means that we're fortunate in this instance. So we remember those tonight, Lord, who are in our nation struggling, Lord, fighting fires, losing lives. We lift them up to you and pray for your comfort for them. And we truly are thankful, Heavenly Father, that we live in a democracy, a representative democracy, where we can make decisions about how we're going to live and rule and govern, and that we have the freedom to do that and the freedom to vote, and the many blessings that we have beyond that, Lord, the abundance, the bounty we have in this nation. We're so grateful, Lord. We never want to take it for granted. And as we go past Thanksgiving and enter a season towards Christmas and those holidays of giving, help us to be more giving in our hearts than we've ever been, to be more giving of ourselves than we've ever been, Lord, that we can help those who are in need around us and help each other to do a better job being good citizens and good neighbors, good friends, good family members. Tonight, Lord, we also ask for your help as we enter into this budget season that we're preparing for. We need your wisdom, we need your guidance, and we ask for all these things tonight in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Allison. Next item on the agenda is approval of City Council meeting minutes dated November 8th, 2018. Do I have a motion and a second to approve those minutes?
So move.
Second.
Any comments or questions, members of council? Seeing none, Mrs. Frank?
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Noviello?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and those minutes are approved. Next item on the agenda is limited courtesy of the floor. We've had no requests for that this evening, so we'll move on to our next item on the agenda, which is a ceremony related to the police department, jointly presented by Captain Miller and representatives of the Fraternal Order of Police. How are you this evening?
Very good, thank you. This time, if I could ask Captain Mays and Agent Damon Hagan to come up front. Council President Williamson, members of City Council, Mayor Campana, and distinguished guests. The Williamsport Bureau of Police would like to formally and publicly recognize several of our officers for distinguished acts of bravery and professionalism in the line of duty. We're holding this ceremony approximately 1 year from the time of the incident, which took place on November 7, 2017. That day was filled with a series of horrific events, which has forever impacted those families involved, as well as our officers. At this time, I'd like to ask the following officers to come to the front. Officer Nicholas Carita, Officer Zachary Geary, Officer Brittany Alexander, Corporal Brian McGee, Corporal Richard Hofford, Officer Tyson Minier, Officer Christopher Salisbury, and Officer Damon Cole. At this time, I invite Agent Damon Hagan. He's been the lead investigator on this case. I'd like to recognize his efforts as well. And he is going to describe the events that took place that night back in November of 2017.
Good evening. On November 7th, 2017, at 6:34 p.m., Lycoming County Communications received a 911 call reporting a shooting at 2225 West 3rd. Reports indicated that a home invasion occurred at this address and that two males had fled out the back door of the residence, and that a white Dodge vehicle left the area eastbound on West 3rd Street. Williamsport Bureau of Police Night Watch officers were dispatched to the incident. Police Officer Nicholas Carita responded westbound on West 3rd and intercepted the suspect vehicle on West 3rd Street heading in the opposite direction. Officer Carita made a U-turn and began to catch up to the vehicle, causing the suspect, Paul Heath, to pull over. Officer Carita then began to perform a vehicle stop at this location. He exited his patrol vehicle in an attempt to conduct a felony stop, and Heath then exited the vehicle. Heath took aim at Officer Carita with a semi-automatic pistol and fired multiple shots directly at him, striking him in the right arm. Officer Carita acted quickly while under fire and used his service weapon to return fire at Heath before taking cover behind his patrol car. Heath fled the scene just as police officers Brittany Alexander and Zachary Geary were arriving in the area, partnered together in a vehicle. Officers Alexander and Geary made a U-turn and began pursuing Heath, who exited the city of Williamsport westbound on Highway 220. Officers Alexander and Geary followed Heath at high speeds during a dangerous vehicle pursuit, which lasted several miles, weaving in and out of traffic, sometimes at speeds in excess of 100 miles an hour. As the primary unit, for most of the pursuit, they communicated pertinent information related to the suspect vehicle, which allowed other officers to respond and assist. Their unit was eventually replaced as the primary unit when the suspect used an off-ramp to turn around, and they joined other units pursuing Heath, who was now headed eastbound on Highway 20 back toward Williamsport. It was during this part of the pursuit that Heath reached outside the window of his vehicle and fired shots back toward a state police unit, which was now ahead of Officers Alexander and Geary. Heath fled to Sheets in Linden, Pennsylvania, where he pulled off the highway, stopped, exited his vehicle, and began firing at officers approaching the scene. Heath then used a firearm to take his own life in the presence of Officers Alexander and Geary and many other members of other law enforcement agencies in Lycoming County. Night watch officers who responded to the initial crime scene discovered the victim, Sean Graham, lying on the floor inside the front door, suffering from a gunshot wound. Graham later died of this wound. Police officers Tyson Minier, Christopher Salisbury, and Damon Cole were involved in the initial response to the scene, the preliminary investigation, and scene security, until assistance could arrive. Field Supervisor Richard Hofford acted quickly by responding to the scene of Officer Carita's shooting and by taking him to the hospital for treatment. Watch Commander Corporal Brian McGee showed extraordinary calm and poise while he managed 3 separate critical incidents and coordinated manpower and resources from his position at City Hall until such time as help could arrive. Subsequent investigation revealed that Heath and an accomplice went to Graham's residence to rob him of a large amount of money, and that during this robbery, Graham was shot and killed. The quick response and extraordinary courage of police officers Nicholas Carita, Brittany Alexander, and Zachary Geary directly led to the apprehension of Paul Heath. Evidence gained from this led to the information that made it possible to identify and later capture Heath's accomplice, Jameer Hines, in the city of Philadelphia. If not for the actions of these three brave officers, the teamwork and leadership provided by other members of this police squad and the assistance of many officers from other agencies in Lycoming County, this crime might certainly have gone unsolved. The actions of these officers reflect great credit upon themselves, the Williamsport Bureau of Police, and the city of Williamsport. At this time, we would like to present the Chief of Police Awards to the officers present. Officer Chris Salisbury, who was mentioned earlier, was unable to make it tonight. The Chief's Award for Distinguished Valor while in Armed Combat, awarded to Police Officer Nicholas Carita for extraordinary bravery and selfless sacrifice while being wounded by gunfire in combat with an armed suspect during his response to a shooting on November 7, 2017. The Chief's Award for Valor, awarded to Police Officer Zachary Geary for extraordinary courage under fire while involved in the pursuit and apprehension of an armed suspect during his response to a shooting on November 7, 2017. The Chief's Award for Valor, awarded to Police Officer Brittany Alexander for extraordinary courage under fire while involved in the pursuit and apprehension of an armed suspect during her response to a shooting, November 7, 2017. The Chief's Award for Excellence, awarded to Corporal Brian McGee for providing great leadership and poise while simultaneously managing multiple related critical incidents, including a homicide, an officer-involved shooting, and the subsequent pursuit of the suspect, November 7, 2017. The Chief's Award for Excellence, awarded to Corporal Richard Hofford for providing great leadership and displaying great awareness while locating and transporting an officer wounded by gunfire to the hospital for treatment during his response to a shooting, November 7, 2017. The Chief's Award for Excellence, awarded to Police Officer Tyson Minier for excellence in the line of duty while responding to and gaining control of the crime scene during the preliminary investigation of a murder on November 7, 2017. And the Chief's Award for Excellence, awarded to Police Officer Damon Cole for excellence in the line of duty while responding to and gaining control of the crime scene during the preliminary investigation of a murder on November 7, 2017. At this time, I would like to present the awards from the FOP. Lieutenant Stephen Helm, President of the FOP, is present and is going to assist with that. The Fraternal Order of Police Lodge Number 29 Awards Committee was formed in 1994 with the intent of recognizing distinguished performance of Williamsport police officers, both past and present. In the nearly quarter of a century since that time, only 3 officers have been awarded the committee's second highest honor, that of the Combat Cross. Chief William Miller, Chief Mike Faust, Officer Tom Bortz make up this small and distinguished group of heroes who displayed extraordinary bravery during combat with an armed adversary. Tonight, among the many medals that will be awarded, we proudly add a 4th name to this group, Police Officer Nicholas Carita. As you've already heard during the earlier reading of the citation, the officers of the Night Watch showed true bravery, leadership, teamwork, and dedication to duty. Their actions led directly to the apprehension of Paul Heath, the arrest of Jameer Hines, and continue to make possible the ongoing investigation into the suspects involved in the initial planning of this robbery. Therefore, the FOP Lodge Number 29 Awards Committee has approved the following awards for the following officers. For an individual act of heroism at imminent personal hazard of life in combat with an armed adversary, and for a wound received in the line of duty inflicted intentionally by an adversary and resulting in a gunshot wound, the FOP awards the Combat Cross and Wound Medal to Police Officer Nicholas Carita. For an act of distinguished bravery in the arrest of a person who is a major threat to the welfare of the community and/or the officer, the FOP awards the Gallantry Star to Police Officer Zachary Geary. For a highly unusual accomplishment under adverse conditions with some degree of hazard to life or limb to the nominee, or where death or injury to a third party was prevented, the FOP awards the Meritorious Service Medal to Police Officer Brittany Alexander. For participation of members of an operating unit and/or a group in a cited action, the FOP awards the Grand Cordon, otherwise known as the unit citation, to the following officers: Corporal Brian McGee, Corporal Richard Hofford, Police Officer Tyson Minier, and Police Officer Damon Cole. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for the Night Watch. At this time, I'd like to call Captain Miller back up to the podium.
Also into attendance this evening, we have Representative Jeff Whelan, who I believe would also like to make a few remarks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. What an honor. What an honor to present recognition to the officers that were involved in this particular instant by not only the State House of Representatives, but also the senator, Senator Gene Yaw. So I may need some help with these if you want to sort them out. I'll make my comments to save some time. Mr. Allison, in your invocation, you said something that reminded me of what my father, way back in my youthful years, instructed me. And he said, when I would get so frustrated with government, and I would get so frustrated with what I felt were injustice, he would remind me, as a World War II vet, that as bad as it might seem here in the United States of America, he would tell me that most countries on this thing called Earth that we share, he said those countries would trade places with the United States of America in a heartbeat. And the one thing that does separate us from other countries, most other countries, and specifically third world countries, is our judicial system and our law enforcement officers. That's what makes the difference. That's what you bring to the table. You provide the quality of life that we so enjoy here in the United States, and for that, I thank you. And on behalf of Senator Yaw, myself, all the citizens, not only of Williamsport, but of all the citizens in Lycoming County, thank you very much for your service. You make us very, very proud. There's got to be a funny story in this, isn't there? What'd your mom say? Come on. She probably was not happy with you. That's not a phone call that a mother wants to get. Well, you must be very, very proud. And with that, for those that have not seen the news today, we did lose another officer in Chicago that was shot dead. So keep that family in your prayers tonight. You guys organized yet? I thought I had them in alpha order, but I may have dropped them. Will you present? Again, thank you, officers, for allowing me to participate in this, and stay safe, and have a very happy Thanksgiving. Thank you, Council.
Thank you. Before everyone files out, let me, people were standing, so I wanted to see if there was anything else.
Yes, before we close this ceremony, I believe Officer Carita would like to make a few remarks.
Please do.
November 7th, 2017. I had no idea what was going to happen that night. It was a long night, not just for me, but for everyone else at WBP. We had 6 patrolmen and 2 supervisors on that night. You don't see those numbers as much nowadays. Officers responded quickly. Not only did they control 2 crime scenes and a vehicle pursuit, with a homicide suspect that nearly killed me. If it wasn't for the number of officers that were on that night, the outcome of this could have been completely different. I want everyone to know that these officers, all of them, are the ones protecting the citizens of Williamsport. Thanks.
Let me just say a couple words on behalf of City Council and really on behalf of the citizens of Williamsport. For those that are behind these officers, they might not be able to see what I can see here, and I don't know what the television can see, but what I see is a group of young professionals. And no doubt, in my mind, were they ever professionals, but one of the things that we've talked about and we've thought about are the youngness of our police department. This is our present and our future. And I remember my predecessor, President Bill Hall, every time a new officer would get hired, and some of you were hired when he was here, he always emphasized what's on your badge and what's on your patrol card to protect and to serve. And he charged you as you were kind of finishing up the hiring process with that message, is that your job is to protect and to serve. This is me thinking about that and thinking about what you guys do every day and what you did on that very important night. I hope you never face protecting and serving in that way ever again. You protect and serve every single day in ways that go unnoticed or get criticized, and we all do things that maybe are fairly or unfairly criticized, but you protect and you serve every single day. But you do it professionally, and you do it with all you have to give. And when called, the whole public can now see that you do it despite the danger, despite the chaos. You go towards the problem when everybody else runs away, and I hope no one ever forgets that. You represent something much larger, of course, across our city and across our country, and I think Representative Whelan said it correctly, maybe about your mother more specifically. I'll say it more broadly. We are all proud of the way in which you protect and you serve. That night and every single day. So thank you for that, and I will open it up to other members of council if they have any additional comments. Mr. Nolio.
Obviously, the performance of these officers is greatly appreciated. Without such individuals, our safety concerns would be far greater than they are. I believe that's true. We can take comfort in the fact that our city has the protection of this caliber. We're very fortunate in that respect. I think that's very important. Williamsport, as Dr. Williamson mentioned, should be very proud of our officers and their leadership. And the fact that such officers willingly put their lives in jeopardy in order to protect us speaks volumes about their character, their sense of duty, their integrity, and their professionalism. Their training has served them very well, as we've seen, and they have undoubtedly served our community very well. I thank them for such exemplary service and hope to see them continue their service for as long as time warrants. And thank you again very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Mr. Slaughter.
I obviously echo everything that's been said tonight.
there truly aren't any words that could put into perspective the unselfishness, the bravery, the heroism that you all displayed that evening. And so genuinely I say, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. I appreciate what you all do for our city and our citizens. And obviously, like President Williamson said, hopefully that never, ever happens again. But if it does, we know that we are in good hands with the officers we have, and we genuinely, and I genuinely, thank you.
Mr. Allison.
It's just, it's always been dangerous to be a police officer, but never so much as now, I think, in our society. The level of violence and attitudes are unprecedented, I'd say, and you're exposed more than ever, and we realize that, and pray for you, and hope for the best for you, and appreciate all that you do. And I know all our citizens do, even ones that might complain at times. When they need an officer on the scene, they're glad when one shows up. So with my other colleagues, I thank you for what you do and how you performed.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Mr. Anderson.
I can't really add to anything that's been said, just to say thank you, thank you, thank you. And we are grateful for the sacrifices that you make every day, and to your families as well, the sacrifices that they've made. And so we're grateful, and we will continue to support you and do anything that we can to help you in any way. But thank you for having our backs every day.
Other comments or questions?
I think that says it
Mrs.
really
Katz.
well. The gratitude, the thankfulness that we feel that you have given us such pride in our city, and you do take good care of us. So thank you very much. And to your families, it's heart-thumping to realize when your sons and daughters are out on the field like that, what could possibly happen. And that was one of the worst nightmares that could happen to a family. And you did wonderful. You really did. So thank you very much.
Ms. Mealy.
There are many thanks being heaped upon you tonight, but all of them are deserved. So thank you once again. Thanks to your families, to your husbands, your wives, your children, your mothers, your fathers, for letting the city of Williamsport benefit from your service. And we are fortunate to be protected by officers like yourselves. We're fortunate when we have someone who is professional, who is adept, who can respond to our terrified calls in the middle of the night or in the middle of the afternoon. So we hope that you all can continue to stay with us and provide us with your terrific service in years to come. But thanks again, especially here at Thanksgiving.
Mr. Mayor.
Publicly, I'd like to state that we have the finest police department in the Commonwealth. And I'm very honored and privileged to be the mayor of this great city because of all of you and all the officers. And I'd like to publicly thank the spouses, the mom, dads, boyfriends, girlfriends, anybody that you are having any type of connection to, because you have made the sacrifices along with these officers. And once again, thank you for your courage, for your honor, and your dedication for all of us.
Thank you. Any further comments? Thank you, captains, for bringing these fine young people in this evening and letting us hear about their true professionalism and contributions to this city and the peril that they sometimes face. So I will.
Dr. Williamson, if I may, and I'm sure this is going to upset some people. I'm Agent Trent Peacock. As a 30-year veteran of this department and senior officer in this department, I'm having a difficult time keeping myself from expressing my true feelings, okay? Everybody said the right things here tonight. The kudos that are well-deserved by these officers, but yet here we stand talking about cutting our department to 45 or maybe even 40. This was a night where we had 6 or 7 officers out there and barely contained it. We had an officer shot and they barely contained it until they could receive backup, which is half hour, 20 minutes, half hour, hour away till other officers get in here. And support from other units, other departments, and yet now we're working with 2 and 3 people on a shift, officers being forced to be OIC, officer in charge of a shift with 3 years on, 4 years on, and we're creating a situation where we're dooming our officers. We see it all across this country where officers are being gunned down, and I'm not happy about it. My blood pressure's about through the roof here now. I have 1 year on this department left. These officers have sacrificed and seen things in their short time on the department that it took me decades to see. In the last several years, we've averaged about 5 homicides a year. Per capita, that's a higher homicide rate than Philadelphia. I don't know that people realize this. I don't know that City Council realizes this. I don't know that the citizens of Williamsport realize what we're facing here. But to be cutting and whittling our department down is unacceptable. I understand there's financial issues. I don't have a good answer for that. Okay, but we're putting officers and the public at great risk by whittling our department down. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we will now move on to a next item on our agenda, which is the public hearing on the conditional use. Mr. Narr.
Good evening, Dr. Williamson and members of council. Roads to Freedom, located at 24 East 3rd Street in the CBD district, is requesting to construct 24 multifamily units, which requires a conditional use. As part of the Pennsylvania Municipal Planning Code, a conditional use requires a public hearing to allow those to speak for or against it. At this time, I can answer some brief questions.
Okay, then let me call the conditional use hearing open. And our normal procedures for such hearings would be for Mr. Narr to make his presentation, anything additional he wants to say, and then we will open it up for public comment in 2 sections. The first section will be anyone who is here to speak on behalf of the project, and our normal time constraints, et cetera, would apply in that case. And then once everyone who's here to speak on behalf of the project has had the opportunity to do that, then we would also open it up for anyone who would like to speak in opposition to the project, giving them an equal opportunity to do so. So I'll turn it back over to Mr. Narr for any presentation he has to make.
Again, they're located at 24 East 3rd Street. They're requesting to put 24 multifamily 1- and 2-bedroom units within the facility, which requires conditional use. During the actual not the public hearing, but the actual presentation, I'll provide more detail as far as that. But again, this is for a public hearing to allow a conditional use hearing for those to speak for it or against it.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone here from the public that would like to speak on behalf of the project? Or in favor of the project? If so, please approach your podium, your name and affiliation for the record, and we usually ask that people limit their comments to about 3 minutes.
Good afternoon. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. My name is Dermot Kennedy. I'm special counsel to Roads to Freedom, and we're here, as Mr. Narr said, to seek conditional approval for a facility that not only has 24 residential units, but it's got many other unique features, not only for the residential units, which are smart living units, which basically allow for far greater independence for the residents of those units, but also on the ground floor of this facility will offer community service facilities that will greatly enhance the living and services provided to the residents and also to the members of the community at large to provide them with greater independence. We do have 2 people that are here this evening that can speak more particularly on behalf of the services. We have the Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Dion, and also our engineer, Eric Brenzer. So I'd like to call them to this podium if I could speak.
Sure, absolutely.
Misty, can you come up for a second?
If you could name and affiliation, just so we have it on the record, and again, we're in the component of to speak on behalf of the project.
Hi, my name's Misty Dion, and like Dermot said, I am the CEO of the Roads to Freedom Center for Independent Living, located at 24 and 22 East 3rd Street. I'm here today just to tell you that, this is not just a multifamily development. This is an answer to many people's prayers. Every day we are moving people from nursing facilities. If there's affordable housing that we can match them up with. Unfortunately, even the accessible housing in our communities are not accessible to the people with disabilities that I work with every day. And so I'm here today to ask for you to approve the conditional use so that we're able to answer their prayers and give them true accessible housing so that they can live in the community instead of in facilities.
Thank you very much. And I believe you'd indicated there was another person here to speak in favor of the project?
Yes, Eric Brenzer, he's our engineer.
Thank you.
One other feature I'd like to bring to the attention of the City Council as well, the unique method of financing. This is not using any public dollars, rather instead is a combination of partnership of private sector dollars that are being used under the Internal Revenue Code to raise private equity that will finance the cost of this facility.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Eric Brenzer. I'm with Ritu Associates. I'm a landscape architect with Ritu, and our offices are at 130 Court Street here in Williamsport. We prepared the application in conjunction with the attorney and the site plan that you have before you. We also prepared a letter outlining the 7 conditions that go along with the conditional use. So essentially, to not get into too many details, we believe that we do comply with all 7 of those criteria. Essentially, we're placing the existing building that they have there now with a new building that is more suited to allow for the addition of the 24 residential housing units. So if you have any specific questions, we'd be happy to answer those relative to the plan, dimensions, any other criteria that's in that conditional use standards. Okay. So with that, any questions you may have, we're here to answer them.
And just to let you know, by our normal procedures, what we usually do is have this public comment period, and then we will move right into the agenda item to approve the conditional use. Okay. To decide whether to approve the conditional use.
Thank you.
And then council questions usually come then.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Are there any additional members of the community that would like to speak in behalf of the project? If you're able.
Oh, I probably can't.
Yeah, absolutely. We can accommodate with one of the other microphones potentially. Mrs. Frank? If you want to come, will that microphone work for you? Sure. Or would this one work better? Okay. It's just for the television audience and for the minutes for the meeting.
Good evening. My name is Tima Cummings. I'm a direct service provider with Center for Independent Living. I'm also a member of the Williamsport community. I reside in Lycoming County in the Housing Authority. I am a citizen of Williamsport, and I do struggle with the apartment that I have, whereas I receive attendant care services, but by allowing this Freedom Village to be built, I think there'll be like, I would be using less hours of attendant care services, which are through the state and state monies. So because the accessible features that the new apartments will allow me to be more independent in my apartment and just independent in general in the community. Because like I said, we right now the apartment I have is they marked it as accessible, but to be truly accessible, it doesn't. I feel that it doesn't meet the criteria for somebody to be completely independent or to be independent to the best of their ability. So by approving this project, you are, I think, in the long run, saving money and also allowing people in the community that freedom and the independence of living on their own and being a part of this community. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the general public that would like to speak on behalf of the project?
Hello, my name is Karen Koch, and I'm also employed at the Center for Independent Living as a short-term support supervisor to persons with disabilities that need a little assistance gaining their independence back. And I'm not going to say anything more than I ask you all to think of Councilman Allison's words at the start of the meeting about compassion. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on behalf of the project? Hearing none, then let me move to the other side. Is there anyone here who would like to speak in opposition to the project? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So move.
Second.
I hear a motion and a second. Mrs. Frank on the motion to close.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Noviello?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and the public hearing is closed. We'll go ahead and reorder the agenda to move down to item 14, the conditional use itself. Can I have a motion and a second to approve the conditional use?
So move.
Hear a motion and a second. Mr. Narr?
Good evening. Again, what we're talking about is Center for Independent Living, Roads to Freedom is located at 24 East 3rd Street. It is currently a facility that operates as far as training. I believe there's laundry services there. I believe there's also a gym. There is support staff there and offices that are currently there. What they are requesting to do is to demo the building so that it can make it more handicap accessible for the independent living and create 24 one or two bedroom units. If City Council does approve this, you do have the ability to put conditions. You do have a general site map. Again, this is just a general site map. If council does approve this, they would still be required to come back before you for a complete land development as well as certificate of appropriateness for the building and to meet all other zoning and building code requirements. At that point, like I said, is when we would address anything zoning-wise, the building, the land development, and everything like that. What they're requesting to do is say, is this use compatible? You do have the 7 criteria. As part of a conditional use, they have to address those 7 criteria which you need to make that decision. And they have addressed that. It also was reviewed by Planning Commission. Planning Commission's only comment was to pass it with a positive recommendation, was that they provide you with a breakdown and a writing, in writing of those 7 criteria and how they feel that they meet each one of those criteria. I can answer any questions at this time.
Thank you. Are there comments or questions from members of council? Ms. Mealy?
Just to be clear, the element requiring conditional use is the apartments on, not the use.
It's
currently.
multifamily, correct?
Right.
Against-
Which, of course, the majority of downtown businesses are topped by apartments.
Correct.
So that is, I mean, I realize it's a conditional use in any situation, but it's nothing that we're not seeing elsewhere in the CBD. In terms of what we're requiring a conditional use for, the type of housing may be different, but the use is no different from what we have in many other places, correct?
In my opinion, again, based off of zoning, it would kind of basically, like you're saying, fall in line. Most of the downtown does have the commercial businesses on the first floor. Second and third do have multi-units there currently at this point in time.
Right, so we're looking at, in this case, a nonprofit on the first floor and multifamily dwelling units on the upper
Correct.
floors and partly the first floor. So to me, I guess there's not really, in terms of the conditional use element, because we know that it exists in the CBD and in many forms already, there's not a lot of contest there. My only question regarding conditions would be, I'm presuming because of the specific nature of these apartments and the tenants of these apartments, that there wouldn't be need, say, for parking for the majority of the tenants. I don't know to what extent. My understanding of part of the purpose of the project is that these units, which will be for, which will, accommodate disabled inhabitants, provide a downtown situation which allows people access often, on foot or, easy access to surrounding things. I guess what I'm asking is I'm only seeing maybe 6 parking spaces in the rear of the structure. And we don't have a parking requirement in the CBD, I'm well aware of that. But is there any reason to be concerned about adequate access to parking for the structure? I noticed that there were 3 handicap spaces, which clearly is a necessity, but.
At this point in time, I believe what you're going to see is for the Center for Independent Living, I would probably say about 90% of them probably don't have the ability or don't have that transportation needs other than maybe people bringing them or leaving, as well as office staff. So I don't see that as an issue as far as creating parking.
That was my interpretation too. I just wanted to be sure that that was in line with everybody else's interpretation. Okay. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Mr. Ellis.
We've had a lot of interaction with this project through ERC and finance and LERTA meetings and everything. So we've learned a lot about the details and the financing and everything. I'll just boil it down to say I think it's a win-win for the city and the Roads to Freedom and the people that are involved with that, because it's in the gateway for one thing, and it's new development, it's redevelopment, but the old's going to be taken down, new is going to be put up, so it's going to blend in nicer, a nicer aesthetics for that area. And at the same time, though, it meets a need. A lot of times when we think about development, we think in terms of retail or business or those kinds of things, and we do focus on that. But development that serves a need in our community, and specifically a human need, I think is the highest kind of development we can have. So I think it really is good for us in a lot of different ways, and it's going to be good for Roads to Freedom and the people that they serve. So I'm happy to see it go forward.
Thank you, Mr. Allison. One thing I would like to add to that, building on those very same ideas, is, and I could put it in the form of a question in to say, is this project consistent with the county's comprehensive plan in terms of both the last one and the current one, in terms of adding to economic development in the city, in particular by having more residents, not just that we already have residences downtown, but we want to encourage more of it, because we've seen what having people living downtown has done positively for our downtown, and the answer, of course, is yes. That it is an absolute benefit to having additional people after 5 o'clock living in our downtown and encouraging our chocolate shops to stay open and all of those kinds of things. And then second, planning that we've done as a community ties into the Gateway Project idea that Mr. Allison said. Clearly, I can remember meeting with representatives of the organization, seems like it was 6 or 7 or 8 years ago, when the kernel of this idea was in the formation stage and really trying to figure out how to make it work, how to put funding together and all of that. And so the idea predated what has happened in the Gateway area. That said, we can also then applaud what is happening as, I believe, the first private development to go along with the public investment in the infrastructure and Lycoming College's investment in the Gateway area as well. That is the next positive domino of the redevelopment of that very important and exciting area of increasingly exciting area of town. And so I think this project is falling at a perfect time to accelerate the momentum of the redevelopment of that area. And I'm excited that it is consistent with all of the ideas and furthering all the ideas that everyone has had on what the potential for that area really is. So I agree with everything that Mr. Allison said and Ms. Mealy said, but I would also add those two things as well. Other comments? Mr. Noviello.
Just out of curiosity, Mr. Brinson, are there amenities associated with the building other than the housing aspect alone?
There actually is, as far as finance-wise, or just the actual.
Well, I'm thinking more along the lines of service amenities.
Correct.
Eating areas, I don't know, cooking stations, something of that sort. Anything of that nature?
Yep. Go ahead.
If you would, just so that it gets on the record, someone.
Again, what I can say is part of that, that's what they do there in the facility. I know myself and Joe Girardi toured the facility probably a couple years ago. And again, they do have, it's like a training thing for them to show them how to basically adapt to what they're doing out here in the community. And again, it's like I said, they have a gym, they have a training facility that shows them how to basically become independent with themselves. That's all part of going to be the first floor, as well as office space, and then the second and third floor would actually be the accommodations themselves.
I just want to make it clear that there were other things other than just simply the housing aspect associated with it. So it's more of a complete picture, I think, that way. So, thank you. Thank you.
Ms. Mealy?
Just that it took a second for it to occur to me that this is a good opportunity to point out something that I feel often falls by the wayside in Williamsport, which is that it's wonderful to build a building with truly accessible apartments. But if our sidewalks aren't accessible and our businesses aren't accessible and our bathrooms aren't accessible throughout the community, then really this is only one small part of taking care of the whole picture. And my hope, of course, is that this serves as a very visible monument to Williamsport's commitment moving forward to provide accessibility for people of all abilities. But I would also call upon the community at Center for Independent Living to point that out on a regular basis to us. It is, I mean, now, of course, is not perhaps the time for you to be doing it. in the sense that I know that nobody wants to come in and ask for something and then say, oh, by the way. But that being said, you know, even here at City Hall, as you doubtless noticed on the way into the building, handicapped accessibility has always been perhaps a secondary priority in a way that we're hoping to fix in the year moving in this year. But I know that we see it all over, even the central business district. And if we are inviting, so to speak, 24 people to live in the CBD in hopes that they will have greater access and greater freedom of movement, then we owe it to them to make certain that that's the case, not just here, but every time that we review a building permit for a new business downtown, every time that we review modifications to anything, you know, within the CBD. That simply to me is something that follows the one next.
And that is something that we do basically anytime a new business comes in, prior to them getting a certificate of occupancy, is to make sure they have that, you know, accessibility both into and out of the building.
Excellent. Well, it's just, I think perhaps it will help us to move forward with that even more if the Center for Independent Living can point out to us if there are issues. Sometimes I think it can be hard for those of us who don't have a disability to understand exactly the extent to which it can be difficult to use ordinary things, the buttons in the elevator, so if you see those things and they are things that we don't seem to notice, it would probably be helpful if you pointed them out. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Katz.
I want to go back 17 years ago when we moved our store downtown. And the interesting thing at that point, there were a lot of, not a lot, but there were several people with wheelchairs that were going through the downtown. And several of them were from out of state. And, you know, you would talk to them and, you know, I have them come into my store. And the interesting thing was they were coming to Williamsport because the transportation was so great. It was easy for them with the buses. Everything was, they tried, the bus, our bus system really tried to help with the handicap. And as we see, our bus services has increased even for handicapped people. And it's so true. I mean, our good friend Jesse, who comes into my store, you know, I always made sure that somebody could always go through any part of my store and be able to see and go through it without any difficulty. And you're right, Ms. Mealy, it's a shame because a lot of places don't take that into account. And that was the interesting thing 17 years ago, even though the buses were starting to cater to some of the handicapped people, that's one of the things they said, our sidewalks were in poor condition. Now we are working on that and we can see that our sidewalks are getting better and better. And there has been a push now that to make sure that they are getting even better as we go along. And I'm happy to see that we are going to have a place where people are going to be comfortable at this point, that they won't have trouble getting into their kitchens and their bedrooms and everything else. I mean, that's so important. And people don't realize how important that is. And, you know, so I'm really pleased that this is, as you put it, I think, the smart apartments. And what a great word to use, smart apartments, that we should be all smart in how we treat one another. And that's how it should be. So I'm pleased to see that this is going to go forward.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, Mrs. Frank on the conditional use.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Novello?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and the conditional use is approved. Do we have a time frame for land development, et cetera?
I think they'd better answer that.
So I'll know the answer to that for sure in March.
Okay. Thank you very much. Let me then move on to the next item on our agenda, which is an ordinance in final reading related to LERDA. Mrs. Frank, in short form, please.
An ordinance amending Article 353 of the Codified Ordinances, the Local Economic Revitalization Tax Assistance Ordinance.
Thank you. Can I have a motion and a second for the ordinance and final reading?
So moved. Second.
Hearing a motion and a second. Ms. Young, how are you this evening?
Fine, thanks. Just an update, the two taxing bodies, the county and the school district, have not yet voted on LRTA. The county's scheduled to vote on November 29th, and the school district's scheduled to vote on December 4th. However, in looking at Section 5 of the ordinance, the administration would like to keep that as it is, and that states that 2 of the 3 taxing bodies must approve the ordinance before the end of the year.
Just to clarify, the current language is all 3, correct?
Oh, I thought it was, and I thought it said and or.
No, the current language, I believe, the way that it reads, it does say and or, but it says if one and or the other disapproves, it doesn't. That is to say, it's kind of a double negative after a fashion. It effectively states that all 3 taxing bodies need to approve.
Okay.
In order for the LRTA to move forward.
Well, that's what we're going with.
Okay.
And I think the key is we can always revisit that before the end of the year if it becomes necessary. But of course, we hope that it doesn't. Okay. Are there other comments or questions from members of council on the ordinance and final reading? Hearing none, Mrs. Frank, please.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and the ordinance passes in final reading. Next item on the agenda is an ordinance amending the 44th year CDBG fund in final reading. Mrs. Frank?
Amend 44th year 2018 Community Development Block Grant Funds.
Can I have a motion and a second to approve that ordinance in final reading?
So moved.
Second.
Hearing a motion and a second. Mrs. Young?
Nothing to add here.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Hearing none, Mrs. Frank?
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes. And so the ordinance is approved in final reading. Next item on the agenda is an ordinance related to the 45th year CDBG. Mrs. Frank?
An ordinance 45th year 2019 Community Development Budget.
Thank you. Can I have a motion and a second and final, for the ordinance in final reading?
So moved.
Hearing a motion and a second. Mrs. Young?
Nothing here.
May I say that you're much faster at saying nothing further to add than Mr. Grado was at saying nothing further to
You just
add.
ruined her time.
Everybody's quicker than Mr. Grado.
Absolutely. Are there any comments or questions on the ordinance in final reading? Hearing none, Mrs. Frank?
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and that ordinance is approved in final reading. Next item on the agenda is a resolution to approve an annual action plan. Mrs. Frank, please.
Resolution to approve the fiscal year 2019 annual action plan for the Community Development Block Grant and Home Investment Partnerships programs.
Thank you. Can I have a motion and a second to approve this resolution?
So move.
Second.
Hearing a motion and a second. Mrs. Young?
Yes, this is our 2019 annual action plan for the city's Community Development Block Grant and Home programs. This is the plan that will be submitted to HUD and includes basically the narrative descriptions of the projects that will be funded in 2019. So that's the budget that you just approved by ordinance. As required by HUD, the city did hold a public hearing on the plan, and it was also on display for 30 days from October 22nd to November 20th today. And this action plan was reviewed by the Finance Committee.
Thank you. Ms. Mealy from Finance?
Finance did review this item and forwarded to the full body of council with a positive recommendation. There wasn't a lot of discussion, but what discussion there was centered mostly around the tallying of the homeless population in the county and how we were dealing with that, how we counted the population and the fact that we don't have a specific count within the city. It's only countywide. Aside from that, this document more or less mirrors, as Ms. Young said, the budget that we approved, that we just approved for a second time. That's all I've got.
Thank you. Are there comments and questions from other members of council? Hearing none, Mrs. Frank?
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Novello?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and the resolution is also approved.
Thank you.
very much. Next item on the agenda is a resolution appointing a broker of record for the city. Mrs. Frank?
Resolution of the City Council of the City of Williamsport, Pennsylvania, to appoint a broker of record for all lines of insurance for the City of Williamsport except for health care insurance for employees and property and liability coverages for the Bureau of Public Transportation.
Thank you. Can I have a motion and a second to approve this resolution?
So move.
Here, a motion and a second. I believe Ms. Mealy is presenting this.
I am. Would you like me to go to the podium, or are you
Sure.
going to let me sit down?
No, let's have you on the podium.
Oh, I knew I shouldn't have worn blue jeans tonight. Okay. Pardon me for one
If you hadn't asked, I wouldn't have said yes.
Okay. As the chair of the Finance Committee, I'm presenting this item on behalf of the full body of the Finance Committee, which was charged by City Council with continuing the RFP process in the City of Williamsport on the matter of our insurance coverage, property and liability and workers' compensation only for the 2019 fiscal year. Finance has, we've spent approximately the last month and a half, I think, pursuing this RFP process once we took it over from the administration when it hit a bit of a stumbling block there in late September, as it seems to me. And as part of this, we've learned perhaps quite a bit about the city's insurance needs and the city's insurance challenges. And I expect in the coming year, as we work with the broker that we've selected, we'll learn even more. We were fortunate to have the substantial counsel from the city's insurance consultant, Ms. Jill Nagy, as well as the advice of several members of the administration in our deliberations. And we strove as much as possible to keep the process open and transparent while respecting some the need for some privacy when contemplating a new contract with personnel. That said, we just to outline the process, the city issued an RFP that I believe was, and you'll pardon me, I didn't look up the dates. The city issued an RFP with responses due toward the end of September. The Finance Committee reviewed the proposals from 4 respondents, and then interviewed all, all 4 respondents and checked references for all 4 respondents before moving forward with our recommendation. We followed what on the advice of the administration and our insurance consultant. We followed what's considered the Brooks method. That is to say, we reviewed the proposals prior to looking at the cost quotes for each proposal and determined our preferred broker before we examined price. Once we had done all of our due diligence, as I said, checked references and conducted interviews, we then went back to our highest ranked broker and attempted to negotiate a price that would fit within the city's budget. We were successful, and so, but that process did not conclude until until this past Monday. Consequently, Council has in front of you an amended resolution to the one that went into the packet that features the name of the chosen broker as well as the compensation, the final compensation that we settled. The chosen broker will be Arthur J. Gallagher Company, and the compensation that was agreed upon is the standard commission in year 1, because due to the tight timeline of this authorization, this potential authorization, and the end of the year, the new broker will not be able to necessarily completely turn around our insurance and our coverages and review our coverages prior to the end of the year. And consequently, they may continue with our existing carrier and existing coverage, amending any gaps, and then look at completely revisiting our coverage in 2019. And then in years 2019, or excuse me, 2020 and 21, the compensation for the broker will be fee-based. So it'll be a $45,000 per annum, not to exceed. And finance, amongst many things, was charged with deciding exactly how long this contract should be issued for, and the length of time that we determined was a 3-year contract, at the end of which we would recommend that City Council again undertakes the RFP process to search for an insurance broker, whether we move forward with the same broker for another 3 years or switch to a different one. The RFP, conducting an RFP approximately every 3 years seems to be a good solution, giving any individual broker enough time to demonstrate their abilities, but then also keeping an open and transparent and accessible process for other interested parties. And I think that's about the end of what I need to say. As I said, Finance appreciated the help of our insurance consultant in all of our deliberations, and we did try to bring this forward as quickly as we could, given the short timeline. When we reviewed the item today at our Finance Committee meeting at 1 p.m., I'm hoping it surprises no one that we all voted to forward it to the full body of council with a positive recommendation.
Thank you very much. Comments or questions from members of council? Just to comment a second on it from my perspective as president of council, obviously this has been in the works for 2 or 3 years, if I recall correctly. And the key of making it an open and transparent process with the goal of maximizing the quality of service that we receive from our insurance broker at the lowest price possible, I think was always what the plan was, and having heard your description tonight, but of course been updated by members of the Finance Committee on a regular basis throughout the process over the last, whatever it's been, 6 weeks in particular, but also the RFP process, development process prior to that, I have confidence that each of those goals, open and transparent process, with a broker that will provide us the best possible service and at the lowest possible price, is the result that we're seeing out of this. And I look forward, obviously with this year, we don't have the time to fully revisit and shop all of our insurances around for reasons you mentioned, but I look forward that in the coming years that this will result in real savings to the city, and of course improved service and improved protection in terms of making sure that our insurance fits our evolving needs. So on behalf of myself and my colleagues not on the Finance Committee, and also the citizens, thank you guys for taking this process on and becoming much more experts on municipal insurance than you might have ever thought you wanted to do. So thanks again.
If I can follow up with actually
Please.
just 1 or 2 things that I neglected to mention initially. First off, it would be the Finance Committee's recommendation the next time that we conduct the RFP process, we've put together the timeline in such a way that the contract with whichever broker is selected is awarded in July of the year preceding the end of our existing broker contract, only because the 4 to 5 month timeline seems to be kind of the sweet spot to allow a new broker to effectively get a grasp on the needs of the city and our assets, and move forward with getting good insurance quotes from carriers. And the other comment is that in the majority of the interviews that we conducted with the 4 respondents, the concept of a third-party appraisal surfaced pretty much every time, that by and large, when insurance companies or when insurance brokers appraise assets, they appraise them using a very limited model that basically takes into account square footage and services within the structure. And if you're insuring, say, a building like City Hall for replacement value, that kind of appraisal is not going to give you an accurate number. That said, it would also be the recommendation of the Finance Committee moving forward that we look to at some point in the near future, budget and industrial appraisal of the city's assets to make certain that we are fully covered for the value of our assets. That, as I said, was recommended by most, if not all, of the respondents to the insurance RFP. Obviously, they probably know what they're talking about. So, okay. If there are no
Thank
other
you.
questions.
Other comments, questions? Mrs. Katz?
Vitally important that we start doing that we take our assets and find out what it really is. It hasn't been done, according to Mr. Nichols. It has not ever, it's been how long ago, Mr. Nichols, was that? The last appraisals?
At least 10 years, I would imagine, 12 years. We had an updated appraisal as to the use of facilities, the exact replacement cost, a lot of those things that really need to be updated now.
And we feel that we should start looking to put this in the budget, that we can pay for the industrial appraisal, so we get a full accounting of what we really have.
Okay, thank you. Other comments or questions? Mrs. Frank on the resolution, please.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Novello?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and that resolution is approved. Next item on the agenda then is a resolution authorizing a subrecipient agreement between the city and county. Mrs. Frank, please.
Resolution authorizing the execution of subrecipient monitoring agreement between the City of Williamsport and Lycoming County in conjunction with River Valley Transit's Unified Planning Work Program for FY 2019 to 2020. I'm sorry, 2018 to 2020.
Thank you. Is there a motion and a second to approve this resolution?
So move.
Here, a motion and a second. Mr. Nichols, how are you this evening?
Fine, thank you. And,
Great.
Good evening. Happy Thanksgiving and all that good stuff.
You too.
I'm available to come over to anybody's house if you need another. Anyway, that said, this resolution is for RVT's planning contract for the next 2 fiscal years, fiscal year 19 and 20, and it's similar to the contract passed that was passed or reviewed by City Council the past several years. And this is for our annual transit development update process, which includes our performance report and many other activities, work tasks required for federal and state compliance activities. The first contract is with the County of Lycoming, and this provides for a provision to allow for the planning money from the federal government, which comes to the county, which is a designated recipient under the Watts MPO process, and then the subrecipient agreement allows the money to pass through to the city and RVT, and that funds 90% of our total planning budget. And then the second contract is the annual one we have with Theodore Poyser Associates, who's our designated project director for the transit portion of the Unified Work Program. This goes through several review processes, including the Watts process, the FTA, PennDOT, Lycoming County Planning Commission, and then finally the recipient agreements in front of you. And this has become a 2-year agreement instead of a 1-year agreement, just to sort of streamline things. And so the total amount of the planning funds, I think, is $113,000 with a match on top of that. This was reviewed by Finance, and we ask for your consideration of this resolution.
Thank you. Ms. Mealy, Finance?
Finance did review this and forwarded it to the full body of council with a positive recommendation. This is a standard resolution.
Thank you.
A fact with which I am well familiar because I sit not only on the Finance Committee but also on the Watts Committee, and we review this. We reviewed this as part of the Watts Committee meetings as well, this merely allows us to move forward with planning activities with the help of money that doesn't come from directly from either the city or RVT's budget, which is always delightful. So. We forwarded it to the full body of council with a positive recommendation.
Thank you. Comments or questions from members of council? Hearing none. Mrs. Frank?
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Nubiello?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and the resolution is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Next item on the agenda is a resolution awarding contract for 2018 street reconstruction. Mrs. Frank.
A resolution awarding the contract for 2018 street reconstruction project.
Thank you. Can I have a motion and a second to approve this resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Hear a motion and a second. How are you this evening?
Not bad. How about you?
Not too bad.
This resolution is to award the contract of the 2018 street reconstruction project to Gleno Hallbaker in the amount of $1,053,218.35. This is the largest street reconstruction project we've put out the bid yet. We had 3 bidders: Gleno Hallbaker, HRI, and Dave Catilius. Gleno Hallbaker was significantly cheaper. This is using Community Development Block Grant funds, Liquid Fuel funds, Act 13, and general funds. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Thank you. And this was reviewed by Finance?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Correct. Thank you. Ms. Mealy?
It's just the Finance Committee show today, isn't it?
Yeah, as I told Mrs. Frank the other day, if it had been about the rocks themselves, we would have had Mrs. Katz give us the report, but since it was about the money, it's all about the finance.
Finance did forward this to the full body of council with a positive recommendation. Our discussion centered predominantly around the remarkable fact that the low bid is $200,000 under the other 2 bids, or nearly. But of course, we've worked with Hallbaker before. We know that they can perform, and Mr. Winder felt that, or said that Hallbaker had stated that it was related to the fact that they were so close to the work that it would save them in fuel time what the increase in product cost was going to affect. That said, it's a large paving project for the city, quite a large paving project, and that will be both, I think, that will be exciting for the citizens of Williamsport in multiple ways in 2019. We are anticipating, I think, didn't you say an April start date? So
yes.
Taking care of most of this early in the season. And Mrs. Katz did inquire about potential conflicts with paving projects and the 4th Street reconstruction in Newberry. And that reconstruction will take a couple of years, so it would be difficult probably to prevent any conflicts, but we don't feel as though there are going to be any major conflicts with our paving program and that street reconstruction right now. But by the way, they're going to have the easternmost part of 4th Street in Newberry closed for 6 months, apparently, at some point coming up soon. So plan your alternate routes now.
I'm assuming the school district knows about that, right?
Yeah.
You just brought a smile to everybody's face.
I know. The only other thing that we discussed was how streets and parks, any plan that streets and parks might be coming up with to deal with the city's alleys. As we know, we are keeping up better perhaps than we'd expected on the street paving element, although perhaps not as well as many would hope. But our alleys are in pretty deplorable condition, and that is partly because of our decision at some point to pave them. and now we can't keep up with the paving responsibilities there, the paving costs there. Mr. Winder did mention, it might be better if I let you say it than trying to paraphrase.
We start grading, or milling the alleys, grading the alleys, and tar and chip. Tar and chip is a lot less expensive, easier to maintain for alleys. It's probably the best way to go.
And that's the whole report. We forwarded it to the full body of council with a positive recommendation.
Thank you. Comments or questions? Mrs. Katz?
We are in for a bumpy ride the next couple of years. Next year, there are so many streets that are going to be repaired, and everybody should really be pleased as far as how our city's going to look street-wise. I mean, this is going to be a fantastic job, but we have all through the city. I mean, wherever you go, there's going to be something that's going to be repaved, so be aware of that. Newberry's going to be started, so be aware of that. But we're all going to be happy people in a couple of years because everything is going to look wonderful. The one thing that I would want Adam to talk about is, since we had the snowstorm and since the leaves did not get picked up in time, can we discuss what's going to happen there?
Essentially, we will clean up leaves until we start patching the roads again. So for the next 4 months, we'll be picking up leaves. As soon as the snow starts to melt, we'll be back to leaf trucks out. Tomorrow, we are going to put loaders out in hopes to recover some piles of leaves that may have gotten pushed around by the snow plows. But
Let's clarify. It has to be leaves and brush. And
right.
You cannot put.
Correct. We prefer
Explain
you don't
what
put
they
any
cannot
brush.
put.
We would hope that it would strictly be leaves. Brush is very hard to pick up through a leaf machine. It clogs up the chute and then creates more problems and holds us up a lot longer.
And if there is brush on the street, it's going to have to be the responsibility of the property owners to take care of that.
Yes.
And if they don't take care of that, what's going to happen?
And we pass it on to codes, and codes enforces the issue with it being on the street.
I just wanted to clarify that for the public, that this is what has to be done at this point. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions? Hearing none, Mrs. Frank, on the resolution, please.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Nubiallo?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and the resolution is approved. Just one comment on the tar and chip alleys.
Yes.
I believe, I remember when the first one of those went in, and it was sort of an experiment at the time on how durable it would be and how easy it would be to install and maintain. And that's got to be 6 or 8 years now, and the ones that I've seen have held up very well.
Yes.
Is that's been the experience, and so that's now going to be a citywide strategy as work on alleys becomes necessary?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I don't believe I've missed anything, is that right? Next item on the agenda is accept for filing. We have the Public Works meeting minutes of August 28th, 2018, the Public Safety minutes of the same date, and the Bureau of Codes reports from February and March 2018. Can I have a motion and a second to approve those for filing?
So move.
Second.
Hearing a motion and a second. Comments or questions? Hearing none, Mrs. Frank?
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Nubiallo?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and those are accepted for filing. Next item on the agenda then is announcements. We will be having an executive session immediately following this meeting. And I believe, Mr. Mayor, that I misspoke earlier when I asked. It's a matter of litigation, correct? Okay, thank you. The next regularly scheduled City Council meeting will be held on Thursday, December 6th, here in Council Chambers at 7:30 p.m. But before that, there will be the 2 budget sessions, the first one being held on Monday, November 26th, and the second at Wednesday, November 28th at 7 p.m., not 7:30. I'm looking at my colleagues. I've almost forgotten that a couple times. Other upcoming meetings, other announcements first. Obviously, happy Thanksgiving, everybody. The City Hall will be closed on Thursday and Friday, in case you were not aware. But other upcoming meetings include on Tuesday, November 27th at 3:30 p.m. is the...
Are we still on for that, Mayor Campana? Okay. Yes.
Is the ERC meeting, and Tuesday, December 4th at 1 p.m. is the Finance Committee meeting, 2:30 is Public Works, and at 3:30 is Public Safety. That brings us to the end of our agenda this evening. Are there comments from members of council? In addition to my wishing all of you happy Thanksgiving. Mr. Allison. Thanks.
Yeah. I just had one comment. This year has been hard on our community in the number of individuals we've lost that have been very involved in different segments of our community. And we lost another recently in Meg Finn, who was really moving ahead and coordinating things in the arts area and tying that in with other developments and doing a lot of good things, and had a good vision. And an unexpected loss that has affected many, but none more so than obviously her family and those closest to her. So just to say it's almost become a cliche, but it's true, our thoughts and our prayers and just our condolences to those who have been most affected are with them tonight, and also for our whole community, because there's another gap to be filled, and we just pray that it will be filled and that we can move forward with the good things that she began.
Thank you. Other comments from members of council? Mayor? Yes, please.
Good evening, City Council. Thank you for the opportunity to present the City of Williamsport's 2019 budget proposal. As you know, I challenged my finance department to create a financial plan to provide a strategy for maintaining the continued financial viability of the city with a proud past and a promising future. While the City of Williamsport is financially solvent currently, it is clear it will face challenges over the next 3 years if additional steps are not taken to control costs more stringently and continue to increase revenue on a regular basis. Our planned trend over the years of government expenses at approximately 3% is unrealistic for the city's 2019 budget. The city is facing a 7% increase in healthcare costs and an increase of $500,000 in the MMO. Adding in contractual union wages increases in benefits, the 2019 budget increase initially showed a minimum of 5% increase in general government expenses, with limited growth in the city's tax base. The financial plan of 2019 to 2021, once again provided by our wonderful team, for parameters for caps in general government expenses, potential real estate tax increases, as well as recommendations for budget reductions, revenue enhancements, and year-end fund balances. The budget in front of you incorporates many difficult choices with the ultimate goal to minimize any recommended tax increases. The recommended cap for real estate increase in the financial plan was 0.75 for this year. However, my budget has reduced this increase to 0.65 mils. The 3-year financial plan calls for a mix of revenue enhancements and employee reductions, which I'm incorporating into this budget. These revenue enhancements are outlined in the financial plan, and employee reductions, where possible, are primarily through attrition. And I want to emphasize that, primarily through attrition. I've had the opportunity to talk to several union employees in the last several days who have reached out to me with ideas to contain costs and I'm sure with everyone's effort, we will continue to get the job done. I'm excited and will pursue many of these strategies for revenue enhancements as outlined in the financial plan with the help of you, City Council. As a team, we can and we must work together to strengthen revenues and reduce the weight of real estate taxes on the citizens of this great city. Thank you, and have a nice Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Let me point out, we're just now getting the budgets. Obviously, we often sit around and eat turkey and read these budgets for the next few days as members of council. But the one thing that I really do appreciate is the work that that Mr. Nichols and Mr. Pollack put in over what must have been a number of months to help create a framework that we can all use as we think through the budget and what the implications we decide over the next month or so will have over the next 3 years. There is a lot of really useful and good information that we're, as members of council, still thinking through and still grappling with that helps us to think about where we've come from and what that status quo over the last, I think they've incorporated 8 or 9 years, has meant for the growth of expenses and the growth of the tax rate in the city, and what that might mean over the next few years if the status quo remains. And then in particular, I think the thing that council will find useful as we grapple with this budget and think about the implications over the next couple of years is a framework for thinking about how to reduce the burden on the taxpayer while maintaining the services that the taxpayer and the citizens of the Williamsport have come to rely upon by thinking about the costs and the savings of a menu of choices we might make over the next few weeks would mean for the bottom line, not just this year. And the important part of now 2 documents working hand in hand together is the implications for 2019, 2020, and 2021. And so that this can be a planning document to help us make the immediate decision and think about the long-term implications. So in particular, I want to thank the 2 of them for all of the work and the thinking on how to put together a plan that could help us make good decisions going forward, should work and function and be useful to council in particular, but the rest of the administration as well. So thank you, gentlemen, for that. And Mr. Mayor, we will, as we always do, dig deep to understand what you've proposed as budget priorities and listen to the administration next week during the 2 budget sessions. And then obviously we'll, as part of that, get to work for our responsibilities then to offer any suggestions to make the next budget year as viable and sustainable as we possibly can. So thank you. Other members would like to comment on this? Mr. Ellis.
I wanted to comment as well on the budget plan. And obviously the things that you've already enumerated, but just to me, it's a document and a plan that it's not nice to have. I believe it's a necessity for governments at any level to have. I wish the ones up the ladder had something like that they'd adhere to, because if you don't have some idea where you're trending or where you're heading, you're going to get somewhere, but you won't get where you need to be. And I hope that this becomes entrenched in the finances of the working of the city government of Williamsport for years to come, long after this council is gone, because I think it not only helps us and the elected officials to make decisions, but to effectively run the internal departments to give department heads an idea how to develop their workforce and make plans for their workforce years out, which really is the most effective way to run a business or a city government or any form of government. It gives them that opportunity as well. So it's great to have this initial plan to start with, and I'm expectant that it's going to be very, very useful to us, but in a lot of different ways that we probably don't even realize right now.
Thank you. If there are no other comments from council, any other comments from the administration? Thank you. Any comments from the general public? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Hearing a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.